As members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, we understand through the plan of salvation, through the restoration of the gospel, that death is not an ending. It's just a transitional period. So we realize as members of the church that while our body is buried in the ground, our spirit yet lives. And Kyle's spirit does live. And Kyle is on the other side of the veil now. And there'll be an opportunity for Kyle and Karen to be together again, along with being able to see their family. We believe in eternal families as Latter-day Saints, and that's a wonderful blessing because we realize that death is not something that's final, that means that's the end of everything. It's a transitional period where we move from this earthly estate on to our next estate. And there will be that reuniting that will take place with this family.
I think Kyle was one who had great faith. Just the way he lived his life, the way he did things, he knew the gospel was true. He had a very strong testimony. And so his faith in the Lord, he leaned upon the Lord to help him with things. I know Kyle had struggles. He had challenges at his work. But Kyle enjoyed life, and I think it was partly because of his faith, that he knew he had a strong orientation in the gospel, and he knew what was right. And he knew that if he kept the commandments and kept his family focused in the gospel, that all would be well.
Well, a good friend will leave you a little different than when you first meet them. And I think all of us in the bishopric became better people because of Kyle, and I know I did personally, because of his spirit, his enthusiasm for service.
Oh, we love to have fun. I mean, I take life much more seriously, maybe just because the way I was, I lived through a lot of things that weren't happy times. And so it was nice to have somebody who just enjoyed life so much and had so much fun with it. And oh, he was good looking. I mean, he was very good looking, and he was very spiritual, and he was very tender. And he made me feel like I was the most beautiful thing in the world. And he really did sweep me off my feet, and he really knew how to tease. I mean, we went together, I don't know how many weeks. Even could have been a couple months before he ever even kissed me. Oh, yes. He was, oh, yes. And he laughed about it afterward, that he was really giving me a run for my money. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. He was a dynamic leader. He was a friend to everyone. I mean, it was just everything that I wanted. I mean, Kyle knew what he wanted out of life, and we both were very determined about what we wanted out of life and what we wanted our children to have. We had the same goals, even though many people said we were so different, and we were. I mean, our interests were different, our personalities were very different, but we both respected so much. And I mean, we used to talk a lot about, our kids are going to have the best of both worlds. They're going to have the best of each of us. And we really respected what each other's strong points were.
I knew Kyle from the time that they moved into the area. I believe it was the Lake Forest Ward that we were all in at the time. I was serving as a counselor to Bishop Bill Berger, and Blaine Lindahl was the other counselor. And Kyle had, and I can't for sure remember what his calling at the time was. He was young men's president or ward mission leader or something like that, but we met together often. And what strikes me to this day is his optimism, his enthusiasm, his personality was so positive about about everything. The youth loved him. He was one of the greatest missionaries that I've ever met. He was bold and yet not overbearing, and he was just a real person.
Okay. I'm going to tell one story that I have other stories, but I've got to tell this story. This is I'm sure other people have maybe talked about this, but this is the story that I remember and is the most impressive to me. Kyle, as I said, he was a daredevil kind of guy, fun-loving. And I'll never forget the day that he was riding his skateboard, or one of his kids' skateboards, and he lost it and broke his leg, and just broke his leg badly. And that was a Saturday. And we heard about it and we felt bad. But the very next day, he comes into church, into sacrament meeting. At that time, he was in the bishopric. And so he came in with his crutches and his cast on one leg, went up the stairs, this is in the Los Alisos building, went up the stairs to the podium and sat down, struggled to do it, but sat down. And, nothing would keep him away from his calling in the church. But on the other hand, he had fun. And it wasn't surprising to me that he would be out scuba diving with the kids at youth conference. I mean, that's just Kyle. That's just what he wanted to do. He wanted to be with those kids. And he was, again, he was a great example for them.
Kyle came into our lives at a point in time where we were in the church maybe 3 years or less, still wondering what we got ourselves into. Some of the kids said, why did we do this? It was a kind of a bit of a turmoil. We had testimonies in the embryonic stage, but they were growing. Well, Kyle, when he came into the bishopric, he wasn't your, if you're a non-Mormon, not a member of the church for 30-some years, 35 years, you have a stereotype, incorrectly, but you have a stereotype of what a Mormon is. He wasn't that. He was just a great guy. He was dynamic. He was effervescent. And he was spiritual. Now, I would have told you when I was 30 that you couldn't be those things. But he was. He was right in the thick of things with the kids. He was in Vegas and he fouled up I think it was his ankle. Joyce said knee, but I think it was his ankle. Whatever it was, he had pins and everything. Got a skateboard, riding a skateboard. But when he was up on the stand and when he spoke, he was a spiritual man and he touched people.
A great man who was loved and who had a tremendous ability to love people and to reach out to people and make sure no one was left out. He was a spiritual giant in many ways because he had a great love for the gospel. He was very obedient. He understood the importance of obedience, and he really taught that. But he had just a tremendous spiritual dimension to be able to kind of help other people understand the importance of living a righteous life and to put first things first, to keep their priorities right in their lives. I've heard him talk about that many times. He also had tremendous judgment, great wisdom. When in the bishopric meetings we would talk about different callings for different people and staffing and so forth, he had a lot of insight into people and what might work and what might not, and he had a really good head and shoulders, very good, level-headed, good judgment with regards to church, priesthood and church government and leadership issues. So I have a lot of love for Kyle, and he made a big impact on me in a very brief period of time, and I know he did so with many other people as well.
As I've mentioned, I've had experiences with him in business because I'm a CPA, and he asked me to help him with some financial matters and with his taxes. And I remember having several meetings with him, in fact, going to his place of business and how enthusiastic he was about his installation business and showing me the trucks and how they stacked all the installation in the trucks, and then talking about tax planning. And his concern was never how do I how do I pay the least taxes, his concern was always, how am I always honest in my dealings with my fellow men? Make sure that I do what I'm supposed to do by the law. I don't want to do anything that is not absolutely honest in any of my dealings with my fellow men, including the Internal Revenue Service. And I was always very impressed by that.
We had a youth conference in 1979 about March, and it was a routine thing we did every year for the Mission Viejo stake to take 150 to 200 kids over on the boat.
I remember the day that he left, and I remember saying goodbye to him in the house, or that he was packing things up and getting things ready to go, and knowing that he was just going to be gone for a few days. Really didn't think much, about him off on another church event. I remember being across the street at Brian Kane's house, and we were in his garage, and we were playing with his superhero action figures. And I remember he had some type of helicopter thing for the action figure, and a car or something like that, and we were doing stuff in the garage playing with these action figures. And I remember my dad coming out of the house, and he was putting his stuff in the car, and he yelled to me. He said, "Kirk." And I was in the garage, and in Brian's garage he had some mattresses, and I remember him yelling to me saying, "Kirk, Kirk," to say goodbye to me. And I thought it would be really funny just to hide from him, and I hid from him. And I didn't say goodbye, I didn't say hello, I just hid. And he, not seeing anyone outside or us in the garage playing, he got in the car and he drove away. And that's the last words that I heard from his mouth was, "Kirk."
As I said, Kyle was working with us in the Young Men's program, and we were getting ready to go to youth conference. And youth conference that year was over at Catalina Island. And so, we were all talking about the different activities that we could be doing over there, and I had been certified in scuba diving, and so Kyle, said, that when he was in Hawaii, he'd done a lot of diving, and he was certified in diving, and so we kind of just decided, okay, well, that would be a fun thing to do. There was a couple other people that weren't going with us, but we'd heard there were other people in the stake that also were going to, be going scuba diving. So we figured that was a good activity to do. There was Kyle and I that were actually scuba diving, and then there was Randy Knight, a good friend of mine, another young man that was in the ward at the time. He was just going to snorkel on top. And so Kyle and I went in the water, and we swam out not too far, probably 100, 200 feet maybe. And we did actually before we went in, we did a check on each other. Everything seemed to be fine. And we got out a ways. The water wasn't too deep. It was only 15 feet deep, maybe 20 feet at the most. And it's kind of in a shallow bay, a lagoon area. So it wasn't like there was a lot of depth or current or anything. So we went out, and we went down on the bottom, and kind of gave each other the thumbs up, and we started swimming together, looking at the fish and stuff, like you do when you scuba dive, and we were just kind of separated a little bit and going through the kelp, and at that point we hadn't been down very long at all, and Kyle was kind of behind me and to the right a little bit, and we swam through just a small little kelp forest, and I turned and he wasn't there, so I just kind of waited and looked for him a little bit, and he wasn't there, so I swam back the way we came from, and I looked for him and didn't see him, and so I came to the surface, and kind of waited for him because that's what you're supposed to do. If you lose your buddy, you're supposed to surface. So I came to the surface and looked for him and figured he'd come up, and he didn't come up, and so I looked a little more, and Randy was swimming around, and I hollered at Randy and I said, hey, look for Kyle, see where Kyle's bubbles are, you know. So we kind of were still just, we weren't really super concerned at that point yet because it had only been a minute, you know. So we still were just kind of swimming and looking at the fish and looking in the same area for Kyle. And after a couple of minutes, I started to get a little bit panicked about it. And so we started swimming back and forth kind of in a grid, just looking for him where we had been. And didn't see him and didn't see any bubbles. We looked on the surface of the water trying to see where some bubbles were coming up, and we didn't see any of that. And so we just kept swimming and looking, and Randy, he swam back towards shore, where I swam out away from shore because I figured, well, that's the direction Kyle was going. Maybe he got ahead of me, you know, when I looked behind. Maybe he wasn't behind, but maybe he had gone ahead. And so I was going out and Randy was going in, and Randy hollered to me that he found Kyle, and I mean, he was pretty panicked at the time, and Randy tried, Kyle was laying on the bottom, and I got to Randy dove, and I got to Randy before Randy even got to the bottom to get to Kyle. And so I saw Kyle on the bottom, and he didn't have his regulator in his mouth. And so at that point, Randy had got a hold of him and was starting to swim up. And I swam down, and I grabbed a hold of him, and we brought him to the surface. And we tried to do mouth to mouth, but it you know, in the ocean it's pretty hard to do. Plus, you know, it was he had drowned already at that point. It was, his lungs were full of seawater. So we yelled, and there was a dock that some of the kids were on, and there was a rowboat on the dock. So Randy and I started yelling, and one of the kids got in the boat and rowed out to us, and they grabbed Kyle and tried to pull him up into the boat. And at that time, Randy and I had been holding him up for quite a while, and that's when I realized that Kyle still had his weight belt on also. So we ditched his weight belt, and they pulled him up into the boat, and then they took him back into the shore.
I heard someone calling, I think it was Kurt or Randy or both of them, saying, "Bishop, Bishop, come here, hurry, hurry." So I went over to the edge of the water, and they had Kyle on the edge of the water, and they said, "He's not breathing," and he had part of his body was still in the water, his legs, and so we went right to work with a CPR. In as much as I was certified in CPR,
I think Randy swam in, and I started swimming in, and I got about 3/4 of the way, and then the adrenaline let off from me, and the fatigue of having held him up, and the fatigue from the emotion got to me, and I started to go down. And a friend of mine on the beach, he ran in and grabbed me and pulled me in onto the beach. And that's, as I was coming in at that point, when I kind of started going down, like I said, is when the adrenaline let off and the emotions took over, and I just kind of lost it. You know, I knew what was going on and started crying, and it was just, you know, pretty much beside myself with, you know, despair of what was going on. And so as I got pulled onto the beach by my buddy, they were doing CPR on Kyle at the time, and things just didn't look very good.
And so we did the CPR, and it went on and on and on and I was saying in my mind, Kyle, come on, I know you can get out of this. And so we were trying to bring the blood around in the body and so that he looked good again. There was no breathing, and so we continued that for an hour and 45 minutes.
They pulled me off into a room, and my bishop at the time, actually I must have already moved into the other ward because my bishop was Bishop Rogers, who was the bishop of the Mission Viejo 2nd Ward at the time. I just couldn't stop crying. And one of the more powerful spiritual experiences that I had as a younger man and in my life actually occurred at that time as he placed his hands upon my head and gave me a blessing. There was just a complete feeling of peace and calm, and I knew that whatever the outcome was, that the Lord's hand was in it, that He was watching over what was occurring. It wasn't just happenstance.
During that time, a couple of boats one boat came over, and some of the people who were familiar with the emergency medicine came over. We got him in the boat and continued the CPR all the way over to where they had the hospital there. And when we entered the hospital, they hooked up the gear and said, you know, straight line, he's not going to make it. And they just, at that time, said it's too late. There's nothing we can do.
My wife, Jamie, at the time was at that time she was one of the youth that was back at the camp, and she just recalls that they all got together, all the youth and the leaders, and they offered a prayer and they sang hymns. And that was from their accounts and from her accounts that there was a very strong spirit there.
I went into the office there, and the police there said, would you, we normally have the police notify, and I said, you know, I would really personally like to make this notification if you can arrange it. I think in coming back, you know, to notify Karen, first of all, I felt driven to be the one to do that because I was very close to Karen and to the family and to Kyle. And so I didn't really want the police department to show up on the door. And so I thought that it would be appropriate for the bishop to come to the door. I knew that I had that old coat on. It was all wet, and I didn't come home to change. What do? Come home, take time to dress up and go back? No, you just take the moment as it comes. And besides that, I was kind of numb about the whole thing by that time. It had been, you know, that was a very different kind of an experience for everybody. And so it was just the feeling that here I was, and here's a dear person, and what are you going to say? And as it turns out, you know, you don't have to say anything. I was home earlier than the conference, and I probably looked wiped out, and here's Karen looking at me and thinking, something is really amiss. And so all she had to do is say, it's Kyle, isn't it? And that was it, yeah.
I was, again, in Brian Kane's garage, playing with those same action figures. And this time, Bishop Berger arrived at the house. And I didn't really think it too strange, as we've had people from the church stop by, and I really didn't connect the dots that he would ever be anywhere, and or at least at the event. And I remember him going in, and Brian and I were playing in the garage, and probably about a half hour, 15 minutes to a half hour after he came in, I remember my mom coming out, and I could tell that she was crying just in the tone of her voice. And I knew that there was something wrong. And just from her broken voice of saying, "Kirk, go get your sister," I knew that there was something that had happened. I went across the street to get Kristen and told her that, "Hey, something's wrong. Mom's crying. We got to come now." And I remember Bishop Berger setting us down, all of us, on our gold couch in the front room there, and him telling us that our father had passed away at this youth conference. And I don't recall too much what happened from there, other than I remember somewhere in between, with all of us crying and trying to digest what has been told to us and how it's going to impact us, and what we're going to do from there. I just remember going into the bathroom at one point and just looking in the mirror and thinking, how could this happen? How could this happen? What are we going to do? How are we going to pull through this?
It was just really, really weird and numb, because when he told us, we heard, and Mom couldn't stand up, couldn't do anything. So we heard, but it was more concern for her, I think, to make sure, because as a little kid, you see your world collapsing, but then you want to know the people that are in charge of making you live and feeding you and everything else are going to be okay. So I think a lot of the older kids, at least, we were very protective of trying to shelter Mom and get her through it.
I mean, I knew when I saw him standing on the doorstep. I mean, I didn't know what had happened, but I knew he was gone. There would have been no reason for him to be standing there. And all I could say was, "Kyle, I can't do this. I cannot do this." And I felt like I couldn't. I really, truly felt like I couldn't do it. And because a lot of people said, Kyle was such a dominant personality that, when you looked at our family, that's who you zeroed in on, was him. And which was perfectly fine for me. And I had always had to be so, I always had to take the initiative to go to church on my own, to go to seminary on my own, to be the strong person myself on my own. And so I had reveled in those almost 15 years of having a strong person lead us out. So it was just overwhelming to me to think that I was going to have to do this by myself. And of course, being pregnant doesn't help you, right? To feel a little overwhelmed at 6 months pregnant.
My world was rocked. Because I lost a friend.
When I learned that he died, I can remember going into the bathroom and just sobbing and sobbing and sobbing and asking the Lord, why? Why was this man taken? Such a good man, a man that made such an impact on so many people, just within our ward. And it's interesting that I don't know that I got the answer that night, but it was the first time since I'd been a member of the church that something so devastating had happened, and I just couldn't understand. And he wasn't there to ask that question, that I had always thought I could go and ask him before.
Kyle was such a presence I mean, he walked into a room and he didn't have to say anything. The room just lit up. And you could call him in the middle of the night. And it was like, if he'd been sound asleep, I don't know, maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. But he was just so there for everybody. And so this presence was, I mean, the physical presence was gone. But he had, I think, imprinted our lives so indelibly. And maybe that's what got Karen through so much, was that his physical presence was gone. But all you had to do was close your eyes and think about Kyle, and you could see those brown eyes, and you could see that smile, and you could feel that joy that he had for living. And so part of him was still with us, but it was just this kind of this gaping hole, was just, and there's still, when you lose people and that they're not that far, but still, you can't reach out and give them a hug. There's still that little space that's kind of empty, and that's what I felt was just,
Oh, it was such a tragic thing. It's something you never witnessed personally. But of course, as a mom, you think, what if it were my husband? He was there too. Or how would I manage with a family, with no dad? It just almost beyond words.
First thing, we were out cabbing, and I was helping Max, and it was in the winter time. I mean, we still had snow in March, and Lene came out, and she kept calling me, Grandma needs to talk to you right now. She's got to talk to you. And I said, I can't do it. Well, anyway, I finally got in there, and when Mother told me what had happened, I was so devastated, because Kyle was my person that, anytime, it seemed as an adult, anytime he could feel my need. If I was having a down day, he would call me up and just cheer me up. And I said, how did you know I needed to call today? I just knew it. I was so devastated, and then I thought back also, 6 weeks before that we were to Hal's little grandson's funeral. And Karen didn't come. This was in Hagerman, Idaho. And we went out to the funeral, and it was a newborn baby. He had birth defects. And Kyle was telling me at that time, this is what I was thinking about, he was telling me at that time his urgency to get things done, and how he could sleep on 3 hours, and how he could do this and this and this, this and this and this. Everything was organized. And but also what hit me too was what we found out, what he wrote in his journal on the way going back from the funeral. And maybe Karen has told you this, but he had written in his journal that he realized and found out that day what the purpose of life was, because he saw that child standing behind the casket as an adult. And he had written that down. And why he brought his journal, I don't know, because he just flew in and flew back. But that's the things he'd written. So that really hit me, but I just thought, the dearest friend, it was very devastating for me.
And while there, our first grandson passed away. And I got the call on Friday night that he was doing bad. Saturday night he was doing worse. And Sunday morning he died about 6 a.m. So when I come back from priesthood meeting, Karen was standing on her doorstep, and the look on her face said it all, that our little grandson had died. And so I loaded up the girls and we drove home. And I think it was on Monday, the very next day, Kyle told Karen that he said, I need to be there. Now this would have been Kyle's grandnephew whom he'd never met. But he just had this sense that he needed to come. And so on Tuesday he flew to Salt Lake, rented a car to Twin Falls, and or to Hagerman, and he was there for the funeral. And after the funeral on Wednesday, I remember him sitting in our lounge chair in our home, his leg cocked up over one of the arms, and he was just all kind of stretched out. He made this, little did we realize how profound this statement was. Oh, I guess I'm just one of those guys who's going to live fast, love hard, and die young. And he left. And the next morning he left. And was home that weekend. And then next weekend, Saturday morning, my mother called and said he'd had this accident and was gone. And I couldn't believe it.
At this point, after he died, the one I had told you about, where I was outside the Relief Society room, and there was a bunch of ladies, I don't know how many months afterward it was, and they were talking about how much they miss Kyle. And I came up on the conversation and just stood there listening to them. And then one of the sisters said, oh, I bet this really sounds strange for us to be talking about how much we miss your husband when he was your husband, you know. And then another lady said, you know, the reason why we could love your husband so much and we could miss him so openly is because there was never any doubt in anyone's mind what kind of relationship the two of you shared.
I should tell you about the service, because the service was so extremely touching. And all of the youth in the whole stake were very, very into this. I mean, very much into it, because they were at the conference. And so we held it in the Los Alisos building, that service. And I was just overwhelmed the way the youth were dressed. They had all the boys in white shirts on one side and the girls on the other side of the chapel. And then I remember it was very difficult to walk up to the front and just think about what was, you know, conducting a service for one of your best friends, a counselor. And there were, you know, and all these youth, that was the really overwhelming feeling, and the spirit was there. And I'm sure Kyle was, you know, possibly there too. I just had the feeling of that. And so it was a very uplifting experience for all of the youth. I think the youth grew through that experience spiritually. It was a wonderful experience for them. But I'm grateful for the way they handled themselves. But the words that were spoken were wonderful words of praise for Kyle and for how well he did in the stake, and then with the youth, and the wonderful person that he is. And so that's basically that episode. And then and it's almost a legacy since that time in the wards in the stake.
That was something new for me. I hadn't been to a lot of LDS funerals. And what they did, and I don't know who made the decision to do it, was to have all the young people in the ward come in wearing white shirts and dark pants, all the boys, all the priesthood, and I believe the girls wore white blouses. And they sat along the side rows. And that was an incredible experience, because a lot of children came to the funeral. And the building was filled to capacity. There was standing room only. I believe there were at least 2,000 people there. This is not a man that was just known in his ward. Every place he went, he made a lasting impression. And many people came from his company, from his work site. It was an amazing thing just to be there and experience that funeral. And to realize for the first time, here he's gone, to realize what an incredible impact he had on so many people. And how many people just wanted to be there to pay their respects for him.
Before we closed the casket, that Kristen and Kirk and I were the last ones there to do that. And I told them that I wanted them to each make a promise to their dad. Something that they felt they could promise him. And so my promise was to try and be patient forever with the children, with myself, with what I was going to have to endure. And so that was really kind of the hardest thing I had to learn, because I'm not always as patient as I would like to be.
When Kyle died, when I heard that that day on the phone from Bishop Berger, I was shocked and very sad, because I knew that they had 4 children, and Karen was at that moment pregnant with her 5th child. And you know, whenever something like that happens, you always think about your family and what that would mean in your family if that had happened to you, and how Karen was going to deal with this, and how the Hess family was going to deal with this. And so it was tough. And I remember, I think that was the 17th. I think it was March 21st, 4 days later, that they had the funeral. And I can remember going to the funeral, and of course I remember reading something in my journal today about that. That was the first Mormon funeral that I had ever attended. And Mormon funerals are special because we talk about the plan of salvation and where we came from and why we're here and where we're going. And that was really a powerful influence on me. Again, remember, I'm a young guy, a convert to the church. We have kids, but very young children. And so all of this had a very big impact on me.
When I got into the house, all I could see was Kyle running around in his bathroom with those, just getting ready for Thanksgiving, getting ready to go to Disneyland, getting ready to do all these fun things. And the first thing that anyone said to me was, Hal came up and he says, Karen wants us to sing Oh My Father. I said, there's no way I can sing Oh My Father, you know, as a family. And I was having such an emotional problem about it. And Hal just took me in a room and he pinned me up to the wall. And he said, looked me straight in the eyes and he said, Kyle's right here. He's here today. Now you just get with the program. This is his graduation. You know, he doesn't like blubbering. He likes fun. Now this is his graduation, so we have to shape it up. He said, you will sing. And so I practiced and I squeaked. But when we went over to where the viewing was the last rites before we closed the casket and had the prayer, I looked down into that casket and saw my brother for the first time. And the thought came to me, just a voice, I am not here anymore. I am ascended. And be of good cheer. Get on with your life. It was like a healing in my wings.
I had a very spiritual experience following Kyle's death. and attending the funeral, and prior to the funeral, the viewing, I had always been very hesitant when it came to death. And in fact, I had a brother pass away a year before, and it was of a concern to me to be around a body. And but I love Kyle so much, I wanted to go to the viewing. I went to the viewing, and a little hesitatingly, walked up to the casket, and Kyle's father grabbed a hold of me, and we talked for a couple of minutes, and he said, "Come on up here." And he brought me right up to Kyle's body, and he just wanted me to touch him and just to be close to him. And I can tell you from that moment on, I have never again had a concern in my life about being around a body. It became crystal clear to me that Kyle was alive. He was doing just fine, and he was busy doing whatever he's doing, and this was just the earthly remains. And it was a powerful spiritual experience for me that I've never forgotten.
I think it was, if you can use the expression, a wake-up call for a lot of people, because Kyle was still quite young. He had a young family. He was young, and in the youth, they hear, Sunday school lessons and so on about you have to always be prepared, and you have to live your life right, and be because you never do know when your time will come. And I know a lot of the youth were, talking that way, like, wow, this is really. I guess it's really true what we've been hearing about. You never do know when the time will come when you have to be ready to go to the other side and go meet your Maker.
As I think about it, I can still remember thinking, that, I need to really get serious about the church here, and I really need to extend myself as a father and a husband better than I have done in the past. And I think Kyle was kind of an inspiration for me to do that, to be a better person, to be a better priesthood holder, just a better church member, better husband, better father, all those things. And so that's, I think, why I love him so much, And I'm going to have a reunion with him someday, and I'm going to hug him, and I'm going to see if I can pin him, take him down and pin him. He'll probably pin me. Oh, what a guy he was.
But over the coming months, it was weird because I remember, I don't know if it was Kent or Karina, probably Karina, the babies, the young kids, they didn't know what was going on, and they'd wake up or they'd be crying for Dad or whatever. And I mean, Kirk and I would just go ballistic on him, and because whenever they'd start crying, then that would trigger Mom to cry. And so we tried to grab it and subdue and get it under control because it's just that self-protection of you want to keep things going in the right direction so you have a secure home and a house and everything like that. And the good thing is she had Cammie, and with Cammie, she was the one thing that said you have to move on. You can't not take care of the baby. There's no way you can go in depression. You've got all these kids. So in the end, her kids ended up saving her, because how do you recover from that? Well, just by doing what you have to do every single day, take care of the kids. But I just remember, I just thought it was pretty messed up that, the little kids, they didn't understand. I just remember always running over to him, grabbing him, trying to distract him, do something else, just to kind of keep it quiet so Mom wouldn't be upset. So it was more about doing that. And that was a good thing and a bad thing, because bad thing being that then you suffered more quietly because you didn't want to bring stuff up, to upset her. So Kirk and I tried to be strong.
We were together in the ward. I didn't really know Karen very well, and because he was in the calling with me, and I was new in the church. So most of the people I knew were in the Young Women's Organization. But when this happened, I felt compelled to go to Karen and to, soon after Kyle passed away, to go, and call her. And I invited her to go out and we had some yogurt together. And we did this on several occasions. We just got together and talked about Kyle. And I learned so much more about him. I mean, I thought I would know it all, seeing all the people that were at his funeral. But the most amazing thing of all is the impact he had on his own family. And you just feel like, a person that is a people person that everyone likes and everyone respects and everyone wants to be, part of knowing him and being around him and being associated with him, that surely his wife would be the one that didn't, have the quality of time and everything, but that wasn't true. She had an absolutely amazing relationship with him.
After Kyle passed away, then I had the opportunity to be able to help Karen with the financial matters that presented themselves upon his death, and how she was going to make it. And she was always very confident that I can do it, I can make it, and I'll continue teaching piano lessons to supplement my income, and I'll be able to make it. And to this day, I still help her with her taxes and take care of that for her, and that's been a real honor. I know people who, in similar circumstances, have made very unwise financial decisions. And Karen has always been very practical and very level-headed when it came to finances, and very conservative. And so knowing her as I did, and knowing Kyle's personality as it was, I had confidence that she could make it, where many could not have made it on what she made it on.
I mean, at first feeling myself personally overwhelmed, but then as the months, the weeks, the months, the years went on, and we felt the ripple effect of his life on other people, and then they in turn became a support system for us. I mean, it was at a point, I remember once Kristen saying that if we needed anything, all we had to do was think or pray about it, and somebody would be there. I mean, that was the point it was for my kids, because, I mean, at first, you just think it's kindnesses, and, which I'm sure it was. But when things just kept happening and in our life to support us, and people had their own personal experiences, then we came to realize that maybe we as a family have a special role to play in this whole experience. Because of the kind of life that Kyle lived, we had a responsibility to be there too for other people and be an example and be a strength wherever we could. And I think that's one of the lessons that we learned not too long afterward, when things kept happening in that direction.
It was just kind of weird because my dad passed away at Camp Fox, and it was kind of strange to me that they kept having the youth conferences at Camp Fox even after he died there. But it was kind of a unique thing too, because it almost felt like when you went there, it was just really like you were walking on some, it was just weird to know he died there. So, I mean, it was fun, and you were very distracted, but there was always a time where you just had to go walk along the beach. But, I mean, I didn't have any spiritual experiences or anything. It was just more that to me, that meant more to me going there than, going to a graveyard.
And one of the the hard things, one of the hard things that I had to go through was that I was called to take his place in the bishopric. And I often remember feelings that I had. It was kind of overpowering anyway, or to be in the bishopric. It was something I wasn't expecting or wanted, but just to realize that I had taken his place.
Right. When it was a pretty hard act to follow.
Yeah, it was.
And he was so well liked by everyone, and so it was hard. It was hard for Rich, I remember.
I would say to Mother Hess was, what do I want more than anything else? I want to be with him again. And what kind of promise do I have if I blow it down here? This is kind of my test, right? I mean, everybody has their tests, and there's some people's tests I certainly wouldn't want. So this is the one I've been given. So, I've got to do the best I can with it. And yeah, I still to this day miss him horribly, but what good is it going to do me to just sit around and mope about it? And I had these 5 kids to raise. I mean, someday, I kind of, I told, Mother has this, I said, someday I'm going to have to face not only Heavenly Father, but him too. And I'm going to have to account for the way I raised our children. And so that was a real motivator to me. It was kind of like, how they say, what would Jesus do? I was like, and what will Kyle do in this circumstance, right?
Not having my dad around was definitely, it made things different. I mean, I remember fathers and sons outings and, having people in the church say, okay, I'm gonna take you to fathers and sons, but, I don't know. I mean, I knew who they were and, had interactions with them, but father and son is something deeply, it's supposed to be intimate, family, so a lot of times it was, at those moments you really notice that, hey, there's something different here, and I think it's a credit to my mom that I didn't always feel that. It was only at rare occasions that, luckily people stepped in and said, I want to do this, I want to, Bishop Daly and Bowden and others would, and Berger as well, would step in and, take us out on family trips or father and son outings. But there were definitely times when I felt that, yeah, this is different, this is hard.
It wasn't a mutual yet. And so I was just on the verge. So one of the things I did have a problem with when he died was I did have a lot of resentment built in that he was like, he had always there was kind of this thing where mom dealt with the little kids, and then he was such the fun guy and did all these wonderful things with the teens that all of us were just so excited to get into the teen world where, hey, we could connect with dad, and look, he's the most popular guy there. And so that was a little hard because we had always expected that dad would be there for that part of our lives.
I'm feeling overwhelmed. I'm overwhelmed that, just like most anyone, that somebody as myself who's never met somebody, on the mortality, can have such a feeling like this, and it's because there's an afterlife and there's a premortal life, and I know that our spirits were together before I came to this earth. I spent, 3 months. 3 months in the spirit world with my father before I was born, and I know I know for a fact that is why I'm responding the way I am right now, because I feel him near. It's a testimony to me that I've gained, and I've known that since I was young. And that in itself has kept me going through the good and the bad of not having, you know, a dad around. And it was always easy, but it wasn't easy when the kids my age would tell me that you don't have a dad. Then it was the reality came to me, and I realized, oh, you're right, I don't have a dad. And it was almost like I didn't know what they were talking about. I was just shocked that somebody was telling me I didn't have a dad, because I knew I did have a dad. So I was kind of confused, and it was kind of hard those moments when I was young, because to me I did have a dad, but to them I didn't, so I didn't know who to believe at some moments. But I always knew.
There are a few times that I had wondered how and where, you know, things were going to fall into place. Not having a dad, I was going to be able to accomplish and do things. But again, the uniqueness and the way in which my father seemed to have reached out to so many key people while he was working with the youth and while he was in the bishopric, that really set the groundwork, at least for me, towards touching those people's, those young men at that time, lives, so that when it became my turn for needing and wanting, they were the first ones to lend a hand. When it came to motivation for, you know, being an Eagle Scout, certainly my mother was there, but certainly in scouting I had the leadership and the support there. When it came to you know, wanting to learn how to surf, or wanting to you know how to act as a young man in the priesthood, and how to be moral clean, and how to be, you know, a youth growing up. There were several adult figures in my life that took on that role wholeheartedly, and were able to fill that void for me, so that I didn't feel like I was missing, though I was certainly missing the companionship of consistency of a father all the time. I felt like on those key areas where a father would be needed, I felt like that void was filled because of his touches on other people's lives in the ward at that time.
All growing up, I mean, celebrating my dad's birthdays just like celebrating anyone else's, you know, and anniversary of his death as well. You know, we've always gone out as a family or individually, as the case may be, gone out and, you know, said a few words. There's always that moment of thinking about another year's gone by and what have we done to bring our family closer. And so it's been, you know, they say the funerals are always for the living, and for us going out there, it's always been for us to take stock of where we're at in our lives. And I know it's pretty much all of our holidays have been that way, to really think about where we are as a family and individually.
I've often wondered if I had been in her shoes, if I would have done nearly as well. I just, who knows about those kinds of things, but she just, I remember when we got to California, we got the news that Kyle had died. We got to California and we walked in the door. She met us at the door, And she was just a brick through that whole thing. And I suppose she has had moments, a lot of moments, when she just shut the door and just, you know, let it all go. But not ever where I've seen. I mean, she never lost control. Been a lot of tender moments where we could kind of weep together a little bit. But she just said, you know, gotta raise these kids and I'll do it the way Kyle would want it done. And she's been amazing, just amazing. I've told so many of my friends about Karen and how she raised this family. And I don't know how she did it, but she did. And she continues to do.
Well, as a bishop, my association with Karen was much different because her kids were pretty well raised. I mean, Cammie was in high school and or junior high. And,
she was one of your Relief Society presidents.
But when I called her, the whole experience of calling her as a Relief Society president was quite interesting because I kept thinking, no, Karen has enough to worry about. She doesn't need the whole ward to worry about. And after a while, it became clear to me that I wasn't listening to the Lord. So I sat down with her and issued the call, and she was a great Relief Society president. She did a great job. And I think that's who the Lord wanted, because she had something to offer to the whole ward. But it was a lesson to me that as a bishop to listen to the Lord a little bit.
When the Lord takes something from us, He replaces it with something else, and I think Karen has been blessed extra special, had extra blessings in her life to get her through this. And Heavenly Father knew that, so He knew that He could take Kyle and she'd be still okay, and that the family'd be okay. And I really believe that in so many areas of our life, that's the way it works.
Well, I mean, I know one thing, because she used to say this all the time. I'm going to have to face your father someday. And he's going to ask me, what did I do? And I want her love for him is ultimately, I think, why she was able to sacrifice the way that she was able to. Because she believes in eternal marriage. She wants to see him again. And if it meant that she would do family home evening even when it would take 3 hours to do it, that's what she did. Because she knew it was all these little things that would make the big difference. And so if it was 5-10 minutes of reading scriptures before dinner, kneeling before dinner with friends, no matter who it was, and eating together, those are the things that I would assume that they did, and I'm too, when my dad was around. And they were values that were important then. And just because someone dies doesn't mean it changes. So to me, I think her love for my dad is what allowed her to carry on, to be able to just move forward day by day, week by week. And I don't know how she did it. I don't know how she did it.
Just as Kyle was such an example as a father, Karen has set new heights and standards on a motherhood. Not just because she raised the kids without Kyle, but how she raised the kids without Kyle. And I don't think she realizes what an example that she has been to many people, and assuredly me. Most definitely.
I look at Karen as a mom as like if you were going to cross the plains with the pioneers, you'd want a Karen Hess there with you. She's the kind of woman that would you'd want to have along.
I don't know what to say, really. I mean, in one word, she's just probably the most selfless person I've ever come to know. So, I don't know what to say. I mean, really, without my mom, I wouldn't know anything about my dad.
We love Karen. What would we do without her? She's, she's the type of person that if you have a problem or if you need, if anything happens to Rich, I'm going to Karen. No, she's a rock.
How do I feel about what my mom has done? I don't know how you capture that. Certainly she has been amazing, and I guess one of the reasons why she did is because she always felt that he was there beside her, and certainly helped foster that feeling within our home, and really tried to help instill that within us. As certainly it probably could have been easy for her to, with his passing and not too many family members around, to pack up and head off to Idaho or head off to Arizona, where there was a little bit more family support to make it happen. But her desires to honor our father and wanting to come out here to California and to make it happen, she kept it and held fast to his desires to see us grow up and have opportunities that he felt no other place we could have.
Impactful was Karen Hess. A lot of us have been here for all the years since Kyle passed away. And we've all watched Karen, some from close up, some from distances. We were not in the same ward shortly after that. I think the Lake Forest ward then encompassed what is now the Santa Margarita Stake. So shortly after that, they created another ward and so forth. But we watched Karen. Everybody watched Karen. As a convert, I particularly wondered, well, how is she going to handle this? I mean, here she is, all these kids and pregnant, and her husband is gone. I mean, that's enough to really tick somebody off, put it bluntly. And so her example of how she rose to the occasion, so to speak, to use a cliche. But of course, it's because of the gospel and because of the eternal perspective. But as a new convert, we didn't fully understand this eternal perspective stuff. Oh, it sounds great. It reads well. And it sounds great, like I said. But here it is in action with Karen Hess. So that was equally important, I think, impactful.
Boy, the Hesses are such a remarkable family, and I will always hold Karen in the highest esteem. She's a wonderful woman. I mean, she has amazing strength after all these years that she's been able to provide for all you kids and be such a wonderful person. She's always sought after for any lesson in the stake or ward that needs to be given because of her zeal and her enthusiasm. And think of all those piano students over the years that have gained so much from her talents.
Well, spiritually as a youth, I had a testimony at the time. I wasn't a wayward youth. I didn't have those kind of challenges and problems. But it just, you know, it was a real testimony just to feel the power of the priesthood. You know, a lot of people probably don't get to experience that so early in their life. What that did for me was, again, it strengthened my testimony on a different level. After that, I served a mission, and I served a mission in an area that was very difficult, very challenging. I dealt a lot with death, dealt a lot of with death with children, and you know, it gave me a testimony and a perspective of the plan of salvation that I think most people of my age didn't have. And maybe even a lot of people that are a lot older. And that prepared me, kind of set the framework for building my testimony, which prepared me for my mission, which again took it to another level of understanding the plan of salvation and the importance of different aspects of it. And then again, many years later, it came into play again when my own wife passed away. Again, it gave me the strength to know that, you know, yeah, it's hard. It's unbearably hard, but it's okay. It's part of the plan. It's just one of those challenges that some of us go through.
My dad's death is one that's just been, I would say it's just a technical reality, in that, you know, all growing up and even today, I mean, in so many people's hearts, and he's still alive today, you know, and you know he's alive by the influences that he has upon others. The decisions we make, the activities that we enjoy. I mean, there's so many, in so many little ways, his life continues to shape our lives. So, yeah, he still lives.
In 1997, my wife and I went back and backpacked the Appalachian Trail. And we'd been on the trail about 3 days, and I was always on the lead. The Appalachian Trail goes from Georgia to Maine. And we were going to do about 700 miles that fall. This was August of 1997. And I had the lead because Pam didn't like to have surprises on the trail with bugs and spiders and snakes. But I had prayed on the trail because I knew if Kyle was alive, he'd been with me. Pam probably wouldn't have gone, just he and I would have done it, because that's his adventuresome spirit. I'm pretty adventuresome, but I think he gets first prize. But on the Appalachian Trail, that's about the third or fourth day out. Prior to the trail, I prayed that I'd ask Heavenly Father if it'd be possible to let him check in on his P-Day. Just kind of keep an eye on us. And about the third or fourth day, walking down the trail, all of a sudden, I felt his presence so profoundly. I didn't hear him, I didn't feel him, I didn't touch him, but he was there. And I stopped, and Pam come up, and I was crying. She says, "Honey, what's the matter?" And I could barely squeak it out. I says, "Kyle's here." And that lingered for about 5 minutes, and finally I got control, and we went on down the trail. And The next year, Pam and I went back, and he wasn't there. But the third year, I was by myself. I was on the trail 109 days by myself. I did 1,301 miles solo hiking. And there was at least 2 times that some really nasty weather set in, and I know that he was my guardian angel. And those were just precious, amazing experiences to have him so close. So not only did my prayer get answered, but he was allowed to come back on his P days and check up on me. I think he was aware all along, but when I think the first year he was allowed to come to know that wish, that prayer had been answered, and that he, although he wouldn't be with me all the time, he was aware of where I was, and if things got serious, he was going to be there to protect me.
When I got married, that was one of the biggest prayers I always had in my heart, is that I would feel him there. I knew that the temple is where he would most be felt. There were other people that had experiences that had seen him at the temple. For heaven's sakes, why wouldn't he be allowed, a portion of his spirit be allowed to be at the temple? And I knew that, hey, I mean, of all places that he should be felt or seen, it would be with one of his kids getting married. And that was a prayer I always had in my heart, that when I got married, it was my greatest desire that I would feel him there, that I would know. And there was a part in the ceremony where I knew, to the point that I didn't even dare turn around, because I thought he would be standing right behind me, and I wouldn't know how to react to everyone else in the room.
Experiences that I've had in relation where I felt the closest with my earthly father, actually have been quite several. The first I can think of was my first year at Catalina Island following his passing. And we had come out of a really strong testimony meeting and had shared my testimony and just really felt the spirit there. And I remember just walking out, and we were heading back to our dorms, and all the other groups all the other guys had already kind of gone ahead, and I was just kind of walking slow and just kind of looking out over the beach and thinking, you know, this is where it happened. This is the experience of it all, and here I am, you know, 4 years later, and I'm on this very beach that my dad got pulled up on, and just thinking about him and in that state of mind. I was just, you know, in my heart, just say, hey, I love you, Dad. I miss you, but we're gonna make it. And I just remember looking up and seeing a falling star. And it was I'd probably seen one other falling star like that before. And it could have been just by chance, as many things are, but I took it as an omen that I didn't see him, but I felt like that one time our Father, our Heavenly Father, put a bright star up to symbolize his love of his Son. And I kind of took that as an omen that was one of my Heavenly Father's symbol to me, that he knew who I was and that I wasn't going to be alone.
How did we keep his memory alive? Well, it was very difficult at first. We wanted, because of Karina, it was very difficult because every time she saw the picture of him on the wall, all she wanted to say was, "Where's Daddy? Where's Daddy?" And cry and cry and cry and cry. And so it was definitely, could have been very easy for us to take all the pictures down, don't mention him. And I mean, there were so many times that I might have been tempted to do that. But again, I think a lot of it too goes back to the two things. One, all these people who kept his memory so alive and still do. I mean, he's still alive in our minds and in our hearts, and he is alive. And second of all, I felt that it gave my children a strength. I think I wanted my children to never feel that they were missing something terrible. I mean, you see divorce situations and, the heartache and the children and problems. And I felt, no, my kids, they're going to know they have a father. He's on a mission. He's just not here now, but they have a father. And I wanted them, because the three younger ones were so young, to know what kind of father they have.
It was talked about so much that it affected the way that I lived, because I felt like, while most kids can leave their house and know where their dad is, I felt that my dad was everywhere with me. And it really prevented and, in a sense, gave me the confidence and the courage to make good choices. And I felt that added strength, especially in my teenage years, when I think others may have not.
I feel she did the right thing, because I feel like Dr. Lord does as well, that, you need to, if the husband's gone or whatever, it's just too complicated to marry and bring another family in to the whole dynamic, because it's just too much distractions. There's not as much chance that the marriage will work at that point, and so you're bringing chaos more into your life. And her whole thing was trying to keep the family together, keep the continuity. And in my mind, and I think the way she presented to the world and to the church, I don't think she ever had suitors, because I feel she presented herself as married. I don't think anyone in the church would think of her as not married. That's just, Kyle was too much of a presence still in her life, in her day-to-day life, that she wasn't open to having that.
I think I would have struggled, and I think a lot of people do struggle when they don't have fathers, figures in their lives. So, especially girls. I think the stories and the memories have really helped me and kept me on the path to be able to, on a spiritual path, not just, marrying a good guy, but spiritually being able to attain that celestial marriage and be able to attain the highest quality of life spiritually, be able to see my dad again and actually meet him. And that's always been my goal, and that's what our goal was as a family, is to be together forever. That was just imprinted in our minds again and again, every family home evening lesson.
The things that my mom did to help keep the memory alive, certainly she, even though it probably wasn't something that she was absolutely excited about, things like camping, those were things that she did just because they were things that were important to my dad. They were traditions and things that he started. And so with the helpful aid of a camper, we continued those wonderful traditions. From camping to going to the beach and treating, as a family, we really didn't participate too much really in sports growing up, in sports activities and it wasn't really till high school that we, collectively as individuals, would actually participate in team sports, mostly because of her desire to keep that tradition of the weekends being sacred. And on Saturdays we do things as a family, and if we played AYSO or football or anything of that nature, it would incumbent upon the opportunities of going out and doing fun things. Skiing was another great love of my dad, and one that he passed on to me, and I certainly enjoyed doing. And that's something that, again, my mom didn't have to do that. I mean, I don't think she ever got on skis. She would sit in the lodge and do her piano stuff, or sit in the camper and cook food for us, and absolute servant of all. But she did it because she knew that she was helping to keep that memory alive of what our father would do if he was there.
Anything that had to do with the love of my dad was probably the funnest family time, because we knew that he would have loved to have been there, and in essence we kind of felt him there. He loved skiing, he loved doing anything and everything under the moon, and it was just special because my dad taught Kristen how to ski and taught Kirk how to ski, and I'm grateful for that. And I'm grateful that Kirk and taught we younger kids how to ski and just kind of kept it going. And me being number 5, I'm glad it didn't stop at number 4, or, you know. But it's just his love for sports and everything else was always just continuously passed down. And
growing up, my mom, you know, in so many little ways, like ways that, you know, as I'm getting older and not thinking about kids especially, but, you know, I think if I was a parent, you know, things that I would want to share with my kids. It's just real interesting how my mom has just taken the high road on so many things. Case in point, I think back to so many of our meals together. They were just casseroles, and, you know, there was always plenty of food. It wasn't always top shelf, you know, as far as, you know, I don't think either of us had a steak until we were in high school, you know. Things like that. But, you know, it's real interesting because I don't think any of us even knew the difference or cared. And, you know, some of my friends and people I come in contact with it, that's kind of a major thing, something that they really enjoy. But we kind of grew up, you know, the conversations at the dinner table were always more important than the food that was placed out for us. So.
I think especially at that time, because that was when my wife had passed away. I'm not getting emotional about my wife. I'm getting emotional about Karen. There's no way that anybody can understand what it's like to lose a spouse. At that time, I was devastated beyond anything I could have ever imagined. And even though through the years since Kyle's death, I had basically been someone in the shadows for the Hess family, I knew what, or I had seen what Karen had done, how she had continued to go forward, raised her family, stayed strong in the gospel, and, you know, did those things that she needed to do to be faithful to her covenants and those vows and covenants that she made with Kyle. And to see the strength that she had to go through that gave me hope at that time that maybe I could do it too.
I would say, as far as life is concerned, I would say you have to live every day
best you can.
You know, the strength comes even now. You know, it comes knowing that there's blessings. And in hindsight now, looking back after so many years of my dad being dead, I just see so many blessings. Blessing that how my mom's been blessed financially, and how each of us children have really defined a certain strength within us because of his death. And I think for me, I wonder what my life would have been like had he been alive. What kind of choices would I have made if he had been? I don't know. But I know that a large part of my life and the big decisions I made, I felt his closeness at hand. And it really helped direct me in the way I knew that I needed to live my life. I felt that he was watching, that he knew, that he was on the dates with me, that he was there, you know, in the most critical part of time, you know, where maybe I wouldn't have felt that kind of assurance if he had been alive.
I guess the one major lesson I've learned from my dad's death and from how my mom has carried on his legacy is patience. Seeing how I've changed through teenage years, and how my brother went through that as well, you know, the rebellious stage, and came out through that, and just the different phases of life. And I think from it all, I've learned patience, to have patience for others, and that it's really helped me in my present line of work as a teacher. I mean, just to take people into account, understand that their life situation at this present moment may not be as conducive to learning or to behavior or whatever. I mean, sometimes life gets in the way. And so it's made me a more patient person, to try and understand that we can't always control the things that happen in life.
I don't know, Kyle has left a real legacy, I think, a real legacy for all of us. He had a positive outlook on life. And then he learned to manage, and he learned to plan, and he learned in like this sleeping thing. He said, you just learn to sleep fast. You can make it on 3 hours. And I asked him how. Well, you just go under. You just focus on it. You just go under and you forget all this turning over and all these kind of things. And so everything seemed like he had an urgency. And I do think the day he died, when he got on the other side, he just looked around. I think it was as big a shock to him as it was to us. Because he had things he needed to do. And his family, and Karen always said, or Kyle always said, Karen always said, I will raise the kids, I will be responsible, but when they get teenagers, you're the one that really relates to a teenager. And you see what happens. So sometimes we don't always get what we want. But in Kyle's death, I think we've all grown. I've tried to take a lot of his good, because he was such a fun-loving person. I've tried to be that way myself. I've tried to incorporate that, to have children love me, to know who I am, make an impression upon them, and so forth. Not meaning that I'm somebody special, but Kyle was an unforgettable person.
As I've gotten older, and I think a little bit more in tune, and have had a greater desire to get to know this person, that I've wanted to have those feelings of knowing that he's close by. And I think the Lord has given me that. And with each time, that something big in my life happens and I am able to feel him there, it's just another reminder of really how close we are to our loved ones and how much they really do care for us.
For me, I see all of these events as stepping stones of growth spiritually. I don't see them as isolated events or things that happened in the past. Especially as I get older, I see that it's all part of they're all connected with a thread, and it's all part of the plan. And as we go through these challenges, as we grow, I mean, we can either choose to grow from a challenge, or we can choose for the challenge to crush us. And as we grow, as we have these kind of challenges and other challenges, as we overcome them, really the only way to overcome them and the only way to deal with them is to turn to the Lord. And I guess in a short, that's where I see myself in all of this, is that these are events that have caused me to develop a relationship with my Heavenly Father and with my Savior. And I think that if I think part of the role for me is that, you know, having that testimony, I hope that I can help other people to get through their challenges and their difficulties by understanding that you don't have to go through them by yourself, and the Lord doesn't want you to go through them by yourself.
Oh. I don't think words can explain. You know, it's kind of like the Christmas morning you wish for, and as a kid, and you want all these toys, and when it happens, you just don't even know how to react. It's kind of one of those you're speechless moments. And I imagine it'll be one of those moments where you just don't have to communicate. That, you know, the eyes will tell all. And I think at that moment, hopefully, you know, my eyes would be open at that point, that I would be able to see all and see the ways in which He so personally was involved in my life. And the realization on my part that those were not just happenstance situations where He was allowed to come down and intervene or have me feel Him, that those are significant times in my life that could have changed the direction of my life. And so I think it would be a, you know, more than that, I would love to be there when He sees my mom. I mean, talk about a reunion. That's, to me, like, I imagine Him see my mom, and then one by one, us being greeted by Him and introducing our spouses. Not that He doesn't know them, but I mean, that's so exciting, you know. It's just, and I think, gosh, what will our meaning be when we see Christ, you know? When we see the Savior. It seems so out there, you know, like so, third party, you know, yeah, that person. So I think, you know, because my dad has died, it becomes so much more personal that, you know, it really makes you look forward to that time.
Karen, her faith has been shown so many times with the way that she has raised her family, the way that she has handled her challenges in raising the family. You can tell that she has incredible faith in the gospel, and she has a strong hope. We have in the gospel faith and hope, and her hope is so perfect that she will be with Kyle. And through her strong faith and hope in the gospel and an understanding of the gospel, she exemplifies what faith, hope, and charity in the gospel are all about, because she's one that always is doing something for someone else. And I think that's the way she and Kyle lived together. That they both were very strong, and they were both willing to do anything for anybody. And I think she's tried to instill that within her children, and they understand the gospel. They understand what's right, and they have that faith and hope that they will be able to see their father again.
Without the understanding of the plan of salvation, there's nothing but grief and despair. There's no hope and there's no peace. Because all you can focus on is the loss instead of, you know, the beautiful reuniting later, and just, you know, sometimes I fail at finding the right words to describe it, to describe how I feel, but it's just, of course there's grief, and of course there's sadness, but there's also a sense of peace and happiness and comfort that comes when you have the gospel perspective.
People evolve, you know, and have to take on certain roles and more roles than they expected to. And when my dad passed away, there became a little more pressure on my mom, just like there became a little more pressure on we kids to stand up and to, you know, I don't know, when I was always growing up, it was, whether it's maybe through the church program or not, but I always had the hope and, you know, that I'm going to see my dad again. I'm going to see my dad again. And I just thought, that's just around the corner. It's just around the corner. And pretty soon the years are going by and they're just feeling longer and longer. My dad's still not around. But just have to keep that hope. And I think my mom has just kind of kept us strong, kept us, you know, keeping that eternal perspective at all times. And so that's kind of how we've all evolved, is just, you know, but one thing that stayed the same is just keeping that eternal perspective, even though we've all kind of changed, you know, as we've gotten older. And I think deep down inside we all still know that he's there.
Okay, well, definitely one of my first questions will be, and why did I have to do this? And hopefully, I think as time has gone on, I've come to understand a little better, maybe, that I had a lot of growing to do. And this was kind of my test. And it's kind of like the little thistles, that picture that I have upstairs, that one day Kyle brought me home some thistles out in the field on one of his job sites that he thought were so beautiful. And a couple of years later, I found a frame print that had that same picture of a thistle all ready to just fly away with its seeds, and then a beautiful pink one that was in bloom, not ripe yet. And to me, that really symbolized us, the two of us, because he was ready to move on. He'd proved himself. He had done everything that he needed to do here in this life, and I was left here to still blossom some more. And it will definitely be, I hope, a very, very special reunion, in that I will feel just like when I face Heavenly Father and Jesus someday, that I did my best. I think that's what will make it rewarding, is that I did my best, and that my kids always knew how much I loved them, how much their father loved them from afar. And if I accomplish that, then it's going to be great.
What makes my dad's death different is that it was kind of almost I don't know, he died doing what he loved to do. I mean, almost like even a martyr situation where, you know, you're in the service of others and you're taken, you know. You know, it'd be different if he died in his sleep or car wreck or something else, but you know, I don't think he really even necessarily needed to be out at that, out at the youth conference, but he wanted to be there, and more importantly, others wanted him to be there, and to participate in the activities that they were going to do, and in that regard, it does make his death tragic, but at the same time, there's a lesson to be learned about, you know, even when your family needs you at home, you're in the service of others.
You know, we're fortunate to have lived in this area this long and known so many people like Karen. And I think that it's her children are such a tribute to her, but her whole family is one that is always will be special in my heart. Having watched them grow, having watched Karen, watching Karen grow, because she has grown a lot in the last 27 years. But I would hope that they, how do I put it? They would know that we did things for them, as little as we did, because of the gospel and because of our love for them. And that now, even though they're all grown and all on their own, that they're all very special to us. And we would do anything for any of them.
I don't think anyone can really say anything bad about the man. It's just amazing the kind of individual he is, and everyone can only benefit from knowing him.
And you know, I didn't know Kyle like I know Karen, obviously, because we got so close, and I mean, but I observed him. But his legacy, oh my, I could write it, because it's in this woman standing here and his kids, and I think that's some of the things I said and when I spoke. Such a reflection. If you want to know Kyle Hess, I mean, look at Kirk and look at Ken. I mean, I see it in both of them, so much of them. In a way, I observed him with the kids for those 2 years, but I could see him, all the years we were here, and the kids, and then Karen. He was never gone. He was here.